Batman Begins asked the question no other comic book movie asked before. What would make a real person want to dress like a bat and punch a criminal in the face? The answer is childhood trauma, unlimited money, and the League of Shadow Ninja Boot Camp. In this depiction, Gotham was more of a Chicago-style city where mafia bosses ruled with an iron fist like untouchable kings, immune to any justice. This creates the perfect atmosphere of a grown-up superhero movie, where the stakes are believable and meant to feel real, making the retribution of Batman more satisfying. The same realism can be said about the Scarecrow, where the fear gas in the comics is grounded to a psychological pharmaceutical drug,
Or with a psychotropic hallucinogen.
that is basically the worst acid trip ever. Batman himself has his whole equipment made by his company's R&D team. Come to think of it, he doesn't even have a Batcave in the first movie. I thought this bright LED lighted room was supposed to be his Batcave, but that wasn't right. And yeah, I know he falls into the cave as a kid, but he doesn't operate as Batman in that cave until the last movie. This is just an example of comic accuracy being sacrificed for grounded realism. They could have had Bruce Wayne in the Batcave doing some bad investigation research, but that would be too cheesy like the comic book and not a serious crime drama about a rich dude dressed as a bat. Despite this, however, Batman Begins was successful with audiences as it was a refreshing take on the character. Even though the film took liberties to tell their own story, the filmmakers respected the source material and paid homage to a legend. So when The Dark Knight released, it broke every ceiling imaginable. It stopped being a superhero movie and became a crime epic, a political thriller, a goddamn masterpiece, literally one of the greatest films of all time. That being said, The Dark Knight still changed some comic book details to tell their story, but the Joker didn't fall into a vat of acid. Instead, he was a manipulative schizophrenic killer with an improvised story about how he got his scars, and the best damn performance ever by Heath Ledger. Two-Face was burned with gasoline, not acid. Man, these Batman villains sure love their acid. That's fine. The comics can keep their acid. However, this trend continued to the third movie, which is not as good as the second movie, so I will criticize it. Bane, he wasn't even on Venom. He was, I don't know, some jacked Eastern European in a winter coat. He's basically Khabib. I guess this weird looking mask could be the Bane mask. Isn't he supposed to be a Mexican wrestler or something? He's a badass because he escaped the world's most unescapable prison. But spoiler alert, he didn't even do that. Someone else did. He took the credit. Batman should be embarrassed that he got his back broken by him. You know who wouldn't have got his back broken by this Bane? Comic book Batman. I'm just saying, the more serious these movies got, the less room there was for actual comic book elements. Batman became so grounded that we'll never see enemies like Killer Croc, Clayface, or Man-Bat, not unless there's some mentally deranged sewer mutant in a hoodie. Although the success of Christopher Nolan's Batman set an industry standard for comic book movies to be dark and real, not all filmmakers chose to forfeit a comic book style for a mature storytelling experience. Take Zack Snyder's Watchmen, which didn't ditch the costumes to be more believable, instead embracing the capes and the cowls, while still finding time for alternative history, Cold War politics, and a blue dude with his junk out on Mars. It was brutal and convincing enough to be believable. This is what would happen if people with superhuman abilities were real. They would most likely be turned to weapons for the government, slowly losing sight of who they truly are in the process, and wondering if they're even good anymore. Watchmen asked a very complicated question. What is good? If you could save billions of lives at the risk of millions all over a lie, is that good? Rorschach believes in the truth no matter what, and is willing to sacrifice a nuclear war to tell humanity the truth about the bomb attack in New York City, which was designed to frame Dr. Manhattan as a global bad guy, thus uniting the world from a dangerous Cold War. But is Rorschach right or wrong for believing the world should know the truth? Dr. Manhattan doesn't think so. Watchmen was deep and didn't apologize for being a comic book movie. Another example of great storytelling that doesn't sacrifice comic accuracy is Daredevil. No, not the Ben Affleck one, the Netflix show, and the Punisher too while we're at it. These shows were raw, bloody, and brutal, that embodied some of the darker comic book stories, full of high-stakes action, especially Daredevil, when you feel every second of the fight. You see Matt Murdock physically get tired and injured through battle, but still having the determination to carry on. It's less of a traditional superhero fight and more like a man with great fighting abilities, using his superhuman senses to have an upper hand on opponents, where otherwise he would definitely get his ass kicked, if not murdered first fight. In fact, one of the fights he was so severely cut up and lost so much blood that I'm genuinely shocked he made it out alive. That ninja fight was tough, while Punisher is a straight monster, brutal and unforgiving in his fighting style, literally being as graphic as possible in how he subdues enemies, which makes sense with his character after all. He's still a good guy, but he believes in finishing the job, unlike Daredevil, who believes in the justice system, which comes to an interesting conflict between the two. Both shows are realistic and grounded, but still hold true to the comic storylines. The gritty realness gives the comic accuracy element more weight. Overall, Daredevil and the Punisher were grounded shows that made you feel every punch while still balancing the comic book element. But not every grounded portrayal accurately represents the character they're supposed to pay homage to. Take Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, for instance. I know you're saying not another Man of Steel criticism, but hold on, hear me out. Superman used to be red and blue. Now, he's gray and grim. Although I always thought Henry Cavill was a good Superman, and even though the Man of Steel wasn't a bad movie, it's still a movie that doesn't understand what makes Superman, well, Superman. Just Zack Snyder trying to do for Superman what Nolan did for Batman. While a dark, grounded movie does work for a character like Batman, because Bruce Wayne is just a regular guy with a traumatic past in a crime-ridden city after all. This type of grounded dark tone doesn't really work for someone like Clark Kent. Even if you give him all the world's childhood trauma, he's still freaking Superman. The man could still fly, and he's over here moping and groping. That's why when you see the scene of Clark not saving his father, it has no emotional payoff, because he's freaking Superman. We all know he could have easily saved his dad, but he doesn't. And why? Because he's a pussy. No, just kidding. But Zack Snyder had to give Superman a grounded emotional reason for discovering himself instead of embracing the possibility of fun that could be a Superman movie, a possibility that the new James Gunn movie seems to embrace. So I'm staying hopeful for the new Superman movie. Look, there's no perfect comic accurate superhero movie. Filmmakers will take liberties with a character to tell a story they believe is compelling to a broad audience, and do hardcore fans right at the same time. There's no doubt the superhero genre is one of the biggest cinematic success stories of all time. While a grounded film that shows the dark side of a hero through psychology can be, groundbreaking, not all characters work well with that kind of direction. Maybe because that character was never meant to be brought down to everyday human anxieties, alienation, and isolation. Because he's a larger-than-life character and always needed a larger-than-life story. Have Superman fly in space or something, I don't know. Well, if there's anything we can agree on in this video, is that the only character that could pull off a dark, grounded, gritty story is Batman and Daredevil and Punisher. So whether it's grounded or comic accurate, just make it real. Just make it true. Respect the source material, and we'll be there for more. There you have it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, like and subscribe. I'm Flithy B, and I'm out.
With a psychotropic hallucinogen.